Get ready for some Italian countryside painting with me, y'all. Hi, my name is Clarice, and I am going to teach you guys how to paint a simple and loose Italian Tuscan countryside watercolor painting. This series is inspired by my watercolor retreat happening in Tuscany, Italy this May 2024. And all supplies for this retreat are sponsored by Princeton brushes and Maimeri blue. This series is going to be just a teeny tiny taste of what we will be experiencing during our 3 in plein air watercolor workshops in Tuscany this May. So if this sounds amazing to you and you're interested in joining us in Tuscany this May for amazing watercolor in the beautiful Italian countryside, I've linked all the details in the description below. So check it out and send me a message if you're joining us.
To start off, let's talk about all the items you're gonna need to paint this with me. And by this, I mean this right here, a pretty loose, beginner-friendly rendition of Tuscany. Now this was real quick. This was just to test it out and see how it turns out. And so my hopes are, fingers crossed, it'll be better than this over here. But I have the reference picture right here. It's from an Instagram account on Instagram, of course, and I'm going to link that below. Feel free to give them a follow. They have beautiful images of Tuscany all around on their feed. Okay, so that's for the visuals. For paper, we're going to be using Baohong watercolor paper. For brushes, I'm going to be using these 3 brushes by Princeton. I love my Princeton brushes. We've got the Princeton Neptune Round number 6. We've got the Princeton Velvet Touch number 4. And then we have the Princeton Heritage in 0, just for details in case we need to have any done. We also need a pencil. I just want to give you guys a basic sketch idea for where things are going to be, give you a visual idea so you know where to paint. And then for colors, we're going to be using these 6 colors from Daler-Rowney, my set of 48. I've got my palette handy over here. I've got water handy. But last but not least, we need a paper towel, because you'll see as soon as we start. Okay, and that's that. Let's begin. So the first thing we're going to do is start doing the basic sketch, so we have an idea of where our trees are and where our little house in the distance is and all that good stuff. So this sketch involves a little bit of perspective, so feel free to tag along with me as you watch me create a horizon line first, very lightly. And then from there, we're going to start to get our perspective point, which is right somewhere. Okay, my line is a little bit off. And then we're going to get our perspective point, say around here. This is where I'm going to keep the house. And then we're slowly kind of doing like an arc that goes out this way. And then the other side that goes out this way. Simple enough. This kneadable eraser is amazing for projects like this because it doesn't leave marks and it doesn't take away all that amazing texture from your watercolor paper. Anyways, rough line over here as best as you can, and then we'll do our little house in the back. It's kind of barely viewable at best, but I'm just going to do a very basic looking house. Most of it is covered. So we're doing the roof at the top and then drawing in our little walls for it, and then maybe another roof off to the side of it, because it kind of looks like there's 2 of them there in the picture. And then we're just kind of doing little boxes within our square. Literally, that's the best way for me to explain it. And yeah, so there we've got like a very basic drawing of the house. This part over there is going to be covered by our cedars, so we're good. Okay, and then now the next thing we're going to do is do our trees. And so for the trees, I'm just doing little stumps first, and we're going to go along this line. And you could probably get away with doing your first 3 and then kind of just allowing the rest to be loose. This first 3 is a great reference for spacing out a little bit and leaving a little bit of white space in between the trees, okay? So there's our first tree, and now we're going to draw the actual tops of the trees. So let's start off from the bottom, do a very basic line going all the way to the top. This is going to be our tallest tree. And then point it, and then coming all the way back down. It also helps if you want to give it more of an idea of where it's ending. So like starting with your tallest here and draw a very rough line to kind of go towards the house. This way you have a better idea of how you're doing the trees. Again, these are just reference lines. We're going to erase them after. Same thing here with the second tree. This one, we know exactly where it ends thanks to the line that we just drew. Again, very, very basic. Don't fret too much about the shape of the trees, because trust me, when we start painting, it's going to be a whole different story. The rest of the trees we'll leave as is. I mean, invisible. Same thing here on this side. Same thing on this side. And here's our number 3. So between these 3s, you can feel free to leave a little bit of white space, just like you can see. And then for the rest, we're just going to be using different hues of green to show us that those are all individual trees. And you can see we add the little stumps at the bottom as well. Okay, so that's our basic drawing. So the first thing we're going to do is tackle the sky. And for that, I'm taking my number 6, and we're just going to dampen this whole area real quickly and roughly. Make sure it's nice and damp. Now, once we're finished dampening our area, I kind of went a little bit around the houses over here and around the trees. This way we get a little bit of flow happening. And so the next thing we're going to do is get some of our blues. So I'm starting off with getting some of my cerulean hue and mixing a nice enough amount of it. Then I'm going to swipe a little bit of my ultramarine blue, because we're going to start off with the darkest blue at the top here. And I'm just holding my brush sideways and just tapping into this area here, which is damp, and giving me a gorgeous bleed. And now that we're done that area, we're going to take the cerulean blue mainly, watered down, and kind of really extend this in a zigzaggy motion. But you want the darkest area to be at the top. So start at the top and then slowly go downward. And look at the image for reference. You'll see there's a whole bunch of white clouds coming in from the left. And so you want to keep that area a little bit more open. And then we're taking down the lighter cerulean hue, pulling it downward. Again, trying to leave as much white space and keeping this color distribution a little bit sporadic. Okay, we're going to get a little bit of that happening down here. Our trees are going to be a lot darker, so if you get a little bit of that into the tree area, don't worry about it too much. I'm just dropping some of that in here around the houses. Make sure you're not painting the house or the structure, whatever you want to call it. And then we are going to wash off the brush. Let's get a little bit of Payne's Gray, just a tad. And we're just going to dab in some of this here. Just getting a very watery brush and dabbing in some Payne's Gray in these areas here. You can mix it in with some of that blue if you want to. Gives it more of a realistic look. Not realistic look, dimensional, I guess, would be a better description for it. And you're taking advantage of the fact that this area is damp to really zigzag your way and get some beautiful blends happening with your blues. Now, once we're done this to our satisfaction, I just want to get a little bit more happening here. What we're going to do is add a little bit of, not add, subtract some color. And the way we're doing that is going to be by using our paper towel. So I've got my paper towel over here, and all I'm going to do is scrunch it up like this in a very rough manner and just lightly dab in areas that I want more white and less blue, or even gray for that matter. So once you are done this to your liking, come back and we're going to continue in our painting for this. Maybe even throw in a little bit more of that blue, dabbing in just a bit to have that nice blending happening. And then we want to do one more thing before we move on to the next bit, is get a little bit of orange. I'm going to be using some orange hue, cadmium orange hue, and I want to drop that in around this area, just a little bit above the house. Again, it is key that you add this while the area is still damp, because again, we want nice, seamless, beautiful blending as opposed to hard edges. And you can only get those beautiful blends when your area is still damp. Okay, just added a little blue over there because I wanted to give it that nice look. Okay, so we are now ready to go on to doing our trees. Very basic blending of the sky to give us some nice lights and darks. And now the trees. Here's how we're going to approach the trees to truly enjoy this watercolor experience and just enjoy this medium by itself. Whether you're painting this or anything else, this is the best technique, and this is what I love doing, is taking a brush, dampening the area that we're going to be painting. So I'm very roughly going in this cone-shaped manner to do our first cedar. And once we have covered it up with this, we're going to mix a little bit of color. And the colors I'm going to take are Hooker's Green and some Sepia Hue. And here we go. So the darkest areas here, we'll be using a slightly different green on this side. So Hooker's Green right here. Got a nice dark. And then Sepia Hue, drop that in. And now drop this in here and watch that color just bloom in the area that you have dampened. And from here we build up on the layering. So taking more of the Hooker's Green, we're just going to add more strokes, loose strokes around, kind of giving it a very rough edge because the trees are not exactly perfect and we don't want perfection. This is a loose rendition of the Italian countryside, and that's what we're doing with our beautiful Tuscan cedar trees. Okay, so that's the idea of how we do the trees. Feel free to add little bumps at the edges, especially on the outer bits here. And then once this area is completely dried up, don't worry, we'll figure out how to add more perfection to our tops. If you get a little bit of blending here happening in your sky because it's still damp, just take a brush and lightly dab off, not dab off, but using little strokes, just kind of take out the color so it doesn't seep in more. And now we're going to continue the same idea here with the rest. So I'm going to dampen this area. You can feel free to get a little bit of a loosey green color in here just so you can see which areas you're dampening. A nice enough trick for those who must have an idea, a more clearer visual of where they're dampening. This technique is tried and true and works really well. And then you go in with that second brush and start painting. Leave a little bit of white space between your two trees, taking a little bit of your sepia every now and then just to kind of give a darker feel to certain areas of the trees. You want to do the darker area mainly to the right hand side of these trees because they're overlapping, so the shadow would be falling in that area. You want to get a little bit of that nice hooker's green as well. Notice I am not washing off my brush. I'm just using the exact same thing and I'm going along. You want these to be quick and fun. And so here, watch how I am not even washing off my brush, but I'm just going right away and doing my tree. And then for the last bit, you can literally just, using the same brush that you have, without getting any more color, that is, just paint the rest of this area green. And again, like I mentioned, we're gonna talk about how we get more of a nicer top fluffing? Yes, sure, why not? Let's call it fluffing to our top areas of the trees to show more individuality. Okay, so we're gonna do this, and now we do the same thing for the next side. The only difference is we're going to be swapping out the hooker's green or mixing a little bit of hooker's green and adding more of our sap green into it. Before I allow this to dry and before we tackle this area, if you look at the image, the bottom of the trees have a darker edge. So feel free to use your number 4. I'm going to continue using my number 6, and I'm going to get a little bit of that mixture, which is the sepia hue, along with the sap green. And we want that nice dark feel to it. And this is what I'm just dropping in right now as these areas are still damp. So first to kind of show individuality with our trees, and then as we kind of go more to the house, we're bringing that downward, almost curving along with the road. We're going to try and get this while it is still damp, if not wet, and get some of our burnt umber and quickly paint in the base of our first 3 trees. Or maybe 4. And then allow that to sort of do its thing and dry up. And then let's tackle this set of trees over here before we move on to the next element. So same idea for these trees, except like I mentioned, we're going to be mixing sap green along with the previous mixture just to get more of a lighter hue happening. So roughly washing off the color from my brush after mixing, I'm going to start doing our first tree, dampening the area. And then getting some of that sap green and dropping that in. Beautiful. And then now that we have that, we're getting some of the sepia hue and we're going to drop that in as well, mainly at the bottoms. Or bottom, since it's the one tree, and then mixing some of the Hooker's green, we're going to drop that in as well. So we've used the sap green as a base, and we're doing the light brown to kind of give us more of that rustic feel, because there's a lot of like twigs and such at the bottom. And then we're slowly edging upward to kind of have it progress more. So the dark green, which is now where we are slightly reverting back to what we did here, a mixture of the sepia and the Hooker's green, we're going to drop that in areas that we want to be darker than the others. So again, it's helpful to use the image as a reference just to see where your light and dark areas are. Okay, so we're going to use this same technique for the next two trees and progress on downward. Now taking my number 4, we're doing the little stumps at the bottom. And you can even dab a little bit of color along as you go down the street towards the house, just to sort of give you that nice blend in. And even drop it in the base of the trees, and that gives you that nice gorgeous bloom of brown into the green. Just loose, easy, and fun, guys. Okay, so we're done our trees. We're going to allow this to dry a little bit, and then we can always go back and add a little bit more details in there. So the next thing we're going to do is tackle our road. We need to give a little bit of area between the trees, or the road and the trees rather. So I'm just doing a little basic sketch of that really quickly. There we go. And so now we're going to use, feel free to use whichever brush you feel works better for you. I'm still comfortable with the 6, so I'm going to use the 6 for this whole area. We're going to use a combination of the burnt sienna. So I'm going to take a very light color of the burnt sienna. And we're just going to roughly sort of dampen this area with it, where the trees are sitting, and go all the way down. And then a little bit past the trees as well. Okay, and what we also want to do is drop in just a little bit of our, I gotta look at the names, burnt umber. And I'm going to do that a little bit over here towards the house, just to kind of give us that nice blend perspective, enhancing our perspective in a loose manner using color, giving us contrast. And then we're also doing it at the bottom here. Before we move on to the next side, there's one more thing we need to do, is adding a little bit of green in the brown. So I like the idea of using whatever we have mixed up here. So leftover green is great. So I'm just going to dab that in while these areas are still damp. because this is what gives us that nice loose edge to our painting without going super detailed. And feel free to drop in more of the color for the trees that are closest to us. And then once it's dried up, we can kind of make it more, give it more shape as opposed to the beautiful gradient we have right now. So now we're repeating the same thing that we did here on this side. Just watch the, or have a look at the reference image as you're painting along. And this will be really helpful as you are using these techniques of wet on wet and blending. Also a little bit of layering to get some nice loose effects here. Okay, so this is me painting this side. So now we're done this, and I know I said this is a very loose style of painting, so feel free to skip this step if you don't want to do this, but I'm just going to get a little bit of my burnt umber or sepia, and I'm using sepia. Feel free to use either one of them, and I'm just going to add a little bit of that shadow area just at the bottom here. And I believe that may be the shadow bits from the house. And then I'm just going to darken some of these tree stumps over here. Again, this part is layering, which really adds a nice, gorgeous effect to your paintings. This is what watercolor is all about layering as opposed to just doing it the one time. Although, mind you, that's also very, very satisfactory to paint and to see. This is where you're enhancing your painting a little further by adding some depth to it. So I'm just also going along and just gently dabbing a little bit of this color along, so we have a hint of an idea that there's stumps along this area. Loose, fun, and productive. Okay, so now that we're done this, we're doing our road. And so for the road, we're using the mixture of yellow ochre and a little bit of burnt sienna. So I'm going to go all the way down. Let's switch to using the number 6 for this. So we're doing it in a very similar fashion to how we did the trees, which is dampening the area first and then going in with our color. We did the skies that way as well, for that matter. Okay, so it's dampened, and now we're gonna go in with some of the yellow ochre. And I'm gonna start off from the bottom. I'm holding my brush off to the side, and I'm going to slowly, loosely bring it upward, because we wanna leave little bits of area. We're not painting the whole area in. And we want the darkest area to come from the sides, and also the start of the page here, or the bottom of the page rather. And as you go higher, notice I'm not getting any more color. I'm just pushing that color towards the top. And then we're getting some of the burnt sienna. Mixing it in with what we had there, getting a very muted version. We don't want it to be too orangey, and we're just sort of lightly extending this color into the yellow ochre. Gorgeous, gorgeous look. And then finally what we're doing is we're using just burnt, I keep forgetting the name, burnt sienna. We're going to start midway and slowly extend a line down to the center. You can feel free to wait for the road to get a little drier before doing this. I obviously couldn't wait, and so I went ahead and did it. I'm also going to add a little bit of burnt umber, just a tad. I have just a tad on the tip of my brush, and I'm just sort of extending that down.
And we are done our road.
Now comes tackling the house. So for the house, I want to keep it fairly loose and simple and not too detailed. So I'm going to start with using my 0 brush, Heritage, and we're taking the darkest color we have, which I thought was burnt umber, but I think it's sepia hue. So getting a little bit of that sepia hue here. Either one of the colors work fine. We're trying to keep it the same as the colors, the other colors we've used here, so that's fine. Now the house looks to be a little bit higher than what it is in the image, so if you want to, well, I'm going to erase this gently because I don't want that to be a reference. And I'm going to do the house exactly like how, not exactly, but loosely like how it is structured in the image that we have. You can use your reference for this part, which will be helpful. And you want a more watered down version of the color on your brush, so you can loosely kind of just paint this in. Paint your two little windows, because those are the areas you want to keep white. And then we progress onto using a lighter color to paint the walls of the house. Now I'm doing another little house at the back. Feel free to do that, or you can just leave things the way they are. And then we're taking a little bit of yellow ochre and I'm mixing that in with some of this brown just to get a slightly different variation from the road. And I'm blending that in without touching the windows really. So we get a nice loose feeling that there's a structure back there. Not quite sure if it's a house or what have you, but it is there. If you want to do a more perfect house at the very end, you're welcome to do that as well. Creating art and expressing yourself through art is always meant to be fun. I am guiding you along how to paint loosely, but feel free to add your own touch to areas that are like this and very subjective really. So take what you learn from this and run with what you would like to see in your painting. So that's it. I'm leaving that as is. Not going to touch that anymore. I will go in with a little bit of green using this same color, same sort of mixtures that we used for our trees. And I'm going to add 2 little trees at the very back of the house. Maybe even a third one to the side just to sort of fill up this area. I think there's one here as well. And then one at the very back. Okay, so I painted quite a few trees at the back of the house, but you get the idea. So I'm going to use the 0 for our shadows, and for the shadows we're going to use a little bit of whatever mixture you have left. As long as it's dark, we're going to be pulling from the same colors we've used. So I'll use the sepia hue. And do we want to use a little bit of Payne's Gray? Yes, let's use a little bit of Payne's Gray in with this. And then we're starting off with our thickest line, which starts from the edge of the page here all the way across this tree. I went slightly over, but that's okay. We're doing a loose rendition of this, so feel free to add your own little flair to it. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? We're not doing perfect lines. We just want that idea when people glance at your painting for the first time that they know, okay, that's a shadow. So I went a little bit thicker towards the edges, but it would be helpful if you're able to really hone in and go thinner if you want it to look more like your image reference, or reference image rather. And on that note, we have one more thing to do and we are done. So using the 6, dampening this area, and we're going to get some of that blue. I'm not going to bother with doing any more of the green in the background. Again, we're making this loose. These are loose, fun little sketches of scenic views that we might be inspired to do. I'm using a Tuscan view because obviously the retreat in Tuscany coming up, but you feel free to use any other scenic view that you might feel led to paint and enjoy. So I'm just getting a little bit of our blue. I'm going to mix it in with the second blue we had, which was the ultramarine blue, and get that nice transition down into our green at the bottom. So it looks a little seamless. Doesn't have to. It's just something that I'm looking to get right now. And then washing off your brush and dabbing all the water off, just go in there and spread it around. Spread that color like you would kindness. And we are done. At least I think we are done. Oh wait, no, we are not done. I lied. We need to do one more thing, and that is pretty much just outlining in a darker shade of green and layering on top of our trees. This can also be optional. You don't have to do it if you feel like you're very satisfied with your painting, but I'm going to get some of my sepia hue and some of my hooker's green. Yep, hooker's green, and we want a nice dark woodsy sort of greenish brown or brownish green, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to add a little bit of strokes, dark strokes, starting from the right edge over here. And we're just very loose strokes, guys, just going to the bottom to outline these trees. So mix a good enough amount of paint and just go all the way along your trees. And again, this will really help elevate and add a little bit of definition without you having to be super detailed with your trees. And here's the top of our trees. Like I mentioned, we're just using this dark color and adding some lines as we go along. And that's that for this side. So we're doing the same thing on this side, except if you want to mix the sap green with it instead, I'm getting a little bit of sap green. Sure, why not? Not that you're going to see a massive difference in my opinion, but just a little bit. And then going in with the tip of your brush and just lightly going from the top all the way down to the bottom. And you're kind of creating this gorgeous loose definition amongst your trees. So if you're ever in a beautiful country scenic route view, picnicking or just driving by and you have time to stop, you have your watercolor supplies, these are the techniques you can use to quickly paint and capture that moment. Getting a little bit more brown for this one just to give so that it stands out with more definition. I hope you guys had fun learning how to paint loosely and quickly with me in this first part to my Tuscan watercolor series, coined after my watercolor retreat happening in May of this year. And once again, if you're interested in checking out what the retreat entails, please check out the link in the description below. Lastly, if you enjoyed this video, guys, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe button, as it really does help my channel grow. And if you end up doing this, I'd love to see how it turns out. So please do tag me online on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. And that's it. Thanks guys for watching, and we'll chat soon. Bye.